The text came at 3:17 a.m. I remember because I'd been staring at the ceiling for hours, counting the shadows that danced across our bedroom wall every time a car passed by. David wasn't home yet. Working late, he'd said. The third time this week. My phone lit up the darkness with an unnatural blue glow. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, almost set it back down and returned to my counting. But something, intuition, fate, whatever you want to call it, made me unlock the screen. He won't be home tonight. He's with me. Again. Thought you should know. 5 seconds. That's how long it took for 15 years of marriage to shatter. 5 seconds to read 14 words that rewrote my entire history. I sat up, my nightgown damp with sweat despite the October chill. My hands were steady as I read the message again, looking for a mistake, a cruel joke, anything that would let me slip back into ignorance. But the words remained unchanged, glowing accusingly in the darkness of our bedroom, the room where we'd made love thousands of times, where we'd whispered dreams, where I'd believed we were building something unbreakable. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I got up and walked to the kitchen, my bare feet silent against the hardwood floors. I poured myself a glass of the expensive Cabernet David had brought home last week. Just because I love you, he'd said with that smile that still made my stomach flutter after all these years. The wine tasted like ash in my mouth. Standing by the kitchen window, I watched the neighborhood sleep under the silver glow of streetlights. Across the street, the Hendersons' house was dark and quiet. Linda Henderson had warned me once, during a neighborhood barbecue. Men like David, she'd said, refilling my glass with knowing eyes. They can't help themselves. I'd laughed it off, secure in my certainty that she was wrong, that David and I were different. The text still burned on my phone screen. No name. Just those 14 words that had turned my world upside down. I wondered who she was. Someone from his office? The new client he'd mentioned with such enthusiasm? The waitress from the restaurant he frequented for lunch? I scrolled through my mental Rolodex of women who had entered our lives recently, searching for clues I must have missed. The wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the kitchen tile. Red liquid pooled around the broken pieces like blood. I stared at it, transfixed by the way it spread in thin rivulets across the white floor. Somehow, the mess seemed appropriate, tangible evidence of the breakage occurring inside me. I didn't clean it up. Instead, I walked to our home office and switched on David's computer. The password came easily to my fingers. Emma R214, our daughter's name and birthday. Emma, who was away at college now, who thought her parents had the perfect marriage. Emma, who had her father's eyes and my stubborn chin. His emails loaded, work messages, lunch appointments, meeting notes. Nothing suspicious at first glance. I moved to his browser history. Also clean. Too clean. David was many things, but he had never been particularly tech-savvy. The absence of evidence was, itself, evidence. Then I found it. Not in his emails or his browser, but in the shared cloud storage we used for family photos. A folder named Insurance Docs, innocuous enough that I'd never have reason to open it. Inside, dozens of photos. Her, him, them together. Hotel rooms I didn't recognize. Beaches we'd never visited. Moments stolen from our marriage, documented like cherished memories. She was younger. Of course she was. Dark hair, bright eyes, a smile that looked so genuine it made my chest ache. They looked happy in those photos. Not just lustful or excited, but genuinely happy. That was the knife that twisted deepest. I downloaded every photo, every message I could find. Then I erased all traces of my digital investigation. By the time I crawled back into our bed, dawn was breaking through the curtains. I lay there, dry-eyed and hollow, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the man I no longer knew to come home and lie to my face again. The broken glass remained on the kitchen floor. I wanted him to see it when he finally returned, a premonition of what was coming next. David came home at 7:30 the next morning, smelling of unfamiliar perfume and carrying coffee from the place across town he knew I loved. A peace offering without an admission of guilt. His eyes widened when he saw the dried wine and broken glass still on the kitchen floor. "What happened?" he asked, setting the coffee down. Are you okay? I looked at him from across the kitchen counter, taking in the details I'd once found so charming. The way his hair curled slightly at his temples, the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident, the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Now those details felt like evidence in a case against him, each one a small betrayal. I dropped a glass, I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. I was tired. He frowned, concerned. I'll clean it up. You should drink your coffee before it gets cold. I watched him kneel on our kitchen floor, carefully picking up shards of glass, wiping away the stain of wine that had seeped into the grout between tiles. Always the dutiful husband when someone was watching. I wondered if he'd been this attentive with her last night. You didn't answer my texts, he said, not looking up. I got worried. The lie slid so easily from his lips. There had been no texts from him. I'd checked repeatedly throughout the night. My phone died. I lied back, tasting the bitterness of our new reality. We were now two people constructing elaborate fictions for each other, building a house of cards with our words. I had to stay late at the office, he continued, standing to throw away the glass fragments. The Peterson account is a mess. I crashed on the couch there. I nodded, sipping the coffee he'd brought. It was perfect. Oat milk, cinnamon, just the right amount of sweetness. It infuriated me that he could remember exactly how I liked my coffee while forgetting the vows he'd made to me. How thoughtful of you to bring coffee, I said, watching his face for any sign of guilt. You must be exhausted. He smiled, relieved at my apparent acceptance of his story. I am. Mind if I grab a shower before breakfast? Go ahead, I said, returning his smile with practiced ease. Take your time. The moment the bathroom door closed and the shower started running, I moved, first to his jacket, hanging by the door. His wallet yielded nothing suspicious, no receipts from hotels, no matchbooks from bars I didn't know. His phone was locked, but I knew his passcode. Emma's birthday again. Reversed. Predictable David. So careful in some ways, so careless in others. His text messages were sanitized. Work colleagues. Me. Emma. But no unknown numbers, no women's names I didn't recognize. He'd deleted them, of course. The call log told a different story, a number repeated several times. Always late at night, always when he claimed to be working. I memorized it, knowing it would match the one that had texted me. I set his phone down exactly as I'd found it, and returned to my coffee. By the time he emerged from the shower, I was reading the news on my tablet, a picture of domestic tranquility. Feel better? I asked, not looking up. Much, he said, toweling his hair dry. Listen, I'm sorry about last night. This project is killing me. I met his eyes then, searching for the man I'd married. It's fine, I said. We all have our priorities. Something in my tone made him pause. For a moment, I thought he might confess, might fall to his knees and beg forgiveness. Instead, he kissed the top of my head and promised to make it up to me with dinner at my favorite restaurant that weekend. For the next 3 days, I maintained my performance. I smiled at the right times, asked about his day, made love to him with mechanical precision when he initiated. All the while, I was gathering information, piecing together the extent of his betrayal like a forensic investigator at a crime scene. Her name was Natalie. She worked at the accounting firm that handled the Peterson account, the real reason he'd been spending so much time at the office. She was 29 to my 43. They'd been seeing each other for 7 months. She thought he was separated. At least, that's what he'd told her. The text she'd sent me had been an act of desperation after he'd refused to leave me, despite his promises. I learned all this by hiring a private investigator, an expense I justified by using the emergency fund David had insisted we maintain for unexpected situations. This certainly qualified. The PI delivered his report with clinical detachment, complete with photographs, timestamps, and hotel receipts. Seeing the evidence laid out so methodically should have broken me. Instead, it crystallized something inside me, a resolve that hardened with each new revelation. I didn't confront David. Not yet. Knowledge was power, and for the first time in our marriage, I held more of it than he did. I needed to be strategic, calculated. The time for emotional outbursts would come, but only when it served my purposes. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I made an appointment with the best divorce attorney in the city. I opened a separate bank account. I documented our assets. I forwarded copies of the PI's report to my secure email. And through it all, I maintained my silence, watching David grow increasingly unsettled by the subtle shift in our dynamic that he couldn't quite identify. Friday arrived, the night David had promised to take me to dinner. I spent the afternoon at an upscale salon downtown, a place I rarely visited because David always complained about the cost. Today, I didn't care what he thought. I had my hair trimmed and colored, my nails done in a bold red I'd never have chosen before, my makeup applied by a professional who understood the concept of subtle revenge. "Special occasion?" the stylist asked as she worked. "You could say that," I replied, watching my transformation in the mirror. "I'm reclaiming something I lost." When I arrived home, the house was quiet. David had texted that he'd meet me at the restaurant, another late meeting with the Peterson account. I smiled at the predictability of his excuse as I dressed in the black dress I'd purchased that morning. It hugged my body in ways my usual wardrobe didn't, accentuating curves that motherhood and age had softened but not erased. The woman in the mirror looked powerful, determined, and nothing like the wife who had been sleepwalking through her marriage for years. The restaurant was crowded when I arrived. Through the window, I could see David already seated at our usual table, checking his watch and then his phone. I took a moment to study him, the way he charmed the waitress with that practiced smile, the slight tap of his foot beneath the table betraying his impatience. 15 years of marriage had taught me to read his body language like a familiar book. I didn't go in. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to another restaurant, the one where I knew he took her. The maitre d' recognized me from the photo I'd shown him earlier that day when I'd stopped by to make arrangements. "Mrs. Taylor," he said with a conspiratorial smile. "Everything is ready." He led me to a corner table where Natalie sat waiting, her expression a mixture of confusion and apprehension. She was prettier in person than in the photographs, delicate features framed by that glossy dark hair, eyes wide with youth and uncertainty. "Thank you for coming," I said, sitting across from her. "Your message said it was important," she replied, her voice higher than I'd imagined. "You're David's wife." "I am," I confirmed, signaling the waiter for a glass of wine. "Though apparently that fact has been misrepresented to you." Color drained from her face. "He told me you were separated, that you were staying together for your daughter until she finished college. Emma graduated last May," I said, watching realization dawn in her eyes. "And we're not separated, or weren't, until recently." The waiter brought my wine and I took a deliberate sip, giving her time to process. Around us, Friday night diners laughed and talked, oblivious to the drama unfolding at our table. "I didn't know," she whispered, fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. "You have to believe me." "I do," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "David is very convincing when he wants something. I should know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I sent you that text. I'm sorry. He kept promising he'd tell you, that we'd be together officially. Then last week, he said he couldn't leave because you were having problems, that you might hurt yourself." I nearly choked on my wine. "Hurt myself? I've been training for a half marathon. I volunteer at a crisis center. I'm the most stable person in our family." "He showed me texts," she insisted. "From you, saying you couldn't live without him." I set my glass down carefully. "May I see them?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone, scrolling to find the messages. When she handed it to me, I immediately recognized the texts. Not from me to David, but from Emma to me last year, when she'd been going through a difficult breakup at school. David had screenshot them, edited them, and sent them to Natalie as proof of my supposed instability. "These aren't from me," I said, returning her phone. "They're from our daughter, Emma, to me, about her college boyfriend." Natalie stared at the screen, then at me, horror dawning in her expression. "Oh my God. David isn't who you think he is," I continued, my voice gentle despite the rage building inside me. "He isn't who I thought he was either." For the next hour, we compared notes, dates he'd claimed to be working late, but was with her, lies he'd told each of us to keep his double life intact, promises made that contradicted each other. With each revelation, My marriage disintegrated further. But strangely, so did my pain. In its place grew something unexpected. Compassion for this young woman who had been manipulated just as thoroughly as I had been. "What are you going to do?" Natalie finally asked, her own glass of wine untouched. "I've already done it," I replied. "I filed for divorce yesterday. My lawyer is having him served with papers right about—" I checked my watch. "Now, actually. At the restaurant where he's still waiting for me." Her eyes widened. "That's why you wanted to meet tonight." I nodded. I needed to understand the full picture before I moved forward. "And I thought you deserved to know the truth, too." As if on cue, my phone lit up with David's name. I declined the call and set the phone face down on the table. "He'll call you next," I predicted, "when he can't reach me." Sure enough, Natalie's phone began to ring moments later. She looked at me, a question in her eyes. "Answer it if you want," I said. "Your relationship with him is your business now. I'm stepping out of the equation." She hesitated, then declined the call. "I think I'm done too," she said, straightening her shoulders with new resolve. "Thank you for this. As awful as it is, I needed to know." We parted ways outside the restaurant, two women bound by the unfortunate experience of loving the same unworthy man. As I walked to my car, my phone continued to buzz with texts and calls from David, frantic now, as the reality of his exposed lies crashed down around him. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the hotel I'd booked for the weekend, a first step toward my new, unencumbered life. Tomorrow would bring complications, explanations, perhaps even tears. But tonight, I savored the quiet power of finally seeing clearly after years of willful blindness. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains as I woke in my hotel room. For a moment, disorientation clouded my mind. Then yesterday's events crashed back into my consciousness. My phone showed 27 missed calls from David and a flurry of texts that ranged from confused to angry to desperately apologetic. I scrolled through them without reading, then deleted the entire thread. The hotel coffee was surprisingly good. I sat by the window, watching the city wake up as I contemplated my next moves. David knew where I worked, where my friends lived, our usual haunts. But he wouldn't think to look for me here, in this business hotel downtown that catered to corporate travelers. I'd paid in cash from the emergency funds I'd withdrawn over the past week, leaving no electronic trail. My lawyer had texted once. "Papers served." He was quite shocked. "Call when you're ready to discuss next steps." I wasn't ready yet. Instead, I called Emma. "Mom?" Her voice, sleepy and concerned, reminded me that it was barely 7 a.m. on a Saturday. "Is everything okay?" "Not exactly," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Your father and I are separating. I've filed for divorce." Silence stretched between us, followed by the sounds of movement. Her sitting up in bed, perhaps, or walking to a more private space in her shared apartment. "What happened?" she finally asked, fully awake now. I had rehearsed this conversation mentally, determined to be honest without burdening Emma with unnecessary details. "He's been having an affair. It's been going on for months. I found out, gathered evidence, and made my decision." "Dad? Are you sure?" The disbelief in her voice stung, though I understood it. David had always been her hero, the fun parent, the one who never said no, who slipped her extra allowance and taught her to drive in empty parking lots before she had her learner's permit. "I'm sure, sweetheart. I'm sorry." She was quiet again, processing. "Does he know that you filed?" "He was served with papers last night," I confirmed. "He's been trying to reach me since then, but I needed some space." "He called me too," she admitted. "Late last night. I've never heard him like that before. Frantic. He asked if I'd heard from you. Said there had been a huge misunderstanding." I closed my eyes, angry that he'd dragged our daughter into this so quickly. "There's no misunderstanding, Em. I have proof. Photos, hotel receipts, everything. I hired a private investigator." "Wow," she whispered. "That's thorough." "I needed to be sure before I upended all our lives," I explained. "I'm not doing this impulsively." "I believe you," she said after a moment. "You've always been the rational one." She paused. "Are you okay? Where are you staying?" "I'm at a hotel for now." Actually doing better than I expected. It was true, I realized. The pain was there, but muted beneath a layer of resolute calm. I'll look for an apartment next week. You could come stay with me, she offered immediately. Sarah wouldn't mind. We have the pull-out couch. The thought of sleeping on a lumpy sofa in my daughter's cramped student apartment almost made me smile. Thank you, sweetheart, but I need to figure this out on my own terms. We talked a while longer. Practical matters mostly, as Emma had always been a problem solver like me. When we hung up, I felt lighter. At least that conversation was behind me. I was stepping out of the shower when someone knocked on my hotel room door. My heart jumped to my throat. Had David somehow found me? I wrapped myself in a towel and approached cautiously. "Who is it?" I called, ready to phone security. "Room service, ma'am." I didn't order anything. There was a pause. "Complimentary breakfast for Mrs. Taylor?" "The order says it's from a Mr. Taylor." Ice ran through my veins. I backed away from the door, reaching for my phone. Before I could call down to the front desk, another text from David appeared. "I know where you are. We need to talk. At least eat something while you're ignoring me." How had he found me? Then I remembered. The credit card I'd used to hold the reservation, even though I'd paid cash. It was a joint card. He must have called every hotel in the area until he found my name. I threw my clothes on, packed my few belongings, and called down to the front desk. "I'm checking out early," I told them. "And there's someone sending things to my room who I don't want to have contact with." The young woman at reception was immediately understanding. "We can have security escort you to your car, ma'am, and we won't confirm your presence to anyone who asks." 20 minutes later, I was driving across town to the one place David wouldn't think to look, Natalie's apartment. She had texted me her address the night before, along with a simple message: "If you need anything, I'm here. I owe you that much." I had never expected to seek refuge with my husband's mistress, but life had become a series of unexpected turns. As I parked outside her building, I wondered if this strange alliance was the first step toward the woman I would become after David, someone who made choices based on what she needed, rather than what was expected of her. Natalie's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial windows. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized university sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that made her look even younger. "You actually came," she said, surprise evident in her voice as she stepped aside to let me in. "I hope that's still okay," I replied, suddenly uncertain. The surreal nature of seeking sanctuary with the woman who had been sleeping with my husband wasn't lost on me. "Of course." She gestured toward a small living area decorated with mismatched furniture and vibrant art prints. "I wasn't sure if you were serious about needing a place to stay." I set my overnight bag down. "David found my hotel. Apparently, boundaries aren't his strong suit." A wry smile touched her lips. "No kidding." The awkwardness between us was palpable as she made coffee and I perched on a bar stool at her kitchen counter. We were two women connected by painful circumstances, neither quite sure how to navigate this unprecedented situation. "I broke up with him," she said finally, sliding a mug toward me. "Last night, after I left you. He kept calling, and eventually I answered. Told him I knew everything." "How did he take it?" I asked, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. "He tried to explain it away at first. Said you were twisting things, that you'd always been jealous and controlling." She shook her head. "When that didn't work, he switched to begging. Said he loved me, that he'd made mistakes, but we could start fresh." The description was so typically David that I almost laughed. "And when that didn't work, he got angry, said I'd regret siding with you, that you were manipulating me." She met my eyes directly. "That's when I knew for sure you were telling the truth." The man I thought I knew would never have said those things. We fell into conversation then, the initial awkwardness dissolving as we compared notes on David's patterns, the thoughtful gifts that always appeared after he'd been particularly absent, the way he rewrote history to cast himself as the victim, the charming smile that could make you doubt your own memories. It was cathartic. This strange debriefing with someone who understood exactly what I was experiencing. "How are you so calm about all this?" Natalie asked eventually. "If I were you, I'd be throwing his clothes into the street or something." I considered the question seriously. I think I've been losing him, or the idea of him, for years. Finding out about you was just the final confirmation that the marriage I thought I had never really existed." She winced. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "In a way, you did me a favor." My phone buzzed again. David, of course. I silenced it without looking at the message. "You can stay here as long as you need," Natalie offered. "The couch pulls out. It's not the Ritz, but it's perfect," I assured her. "Just for a few days until I can find an apartment." That night, lying on Natalie's pull-out couch, I had my first real cry since discovering David's betrayal. The tears weren't for him, though, or even for our marriage. They were for the years I'd spent trying to be the perfect wife, shrinking myself to fit his expectations, mistaking his possessiveness for love. They were for the woman who had believed that loyalty meant enduring unhappiness in silence. In the morning, Natalie and I walked to a nearby cafe for breakfast. As we waited for our order, my lawyer called. "David wants to meet," she informed me. "Says he won't agree to any settlement terms until he speaks with you in person." "That's not happening," I replied firmly. I advised him the same, but he's insistent. He's hired Monroe as counsel. I grimaced. James Monroe was known for aggressive divorce litigation that dragged cases out for years. "So he's planning to fight dirty." "It appears so," my lawyer confirmed. "He's already challenging the PI evidence as illegally obtained and claiming you abandoned the marital home, which could impact property division." Beside me, Natalie raised an eyebrow, clearly overhearing enough to follow the conversation. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "Document everything. Every call, every text, every attempt to contact you. Forward me everything you have about the affair. And think about what you really want from this divorce. What's worth fighting for, and what you can let go." After hanging up, I explained the situation to Natalie. "He's such a hypocrite," she fumed. "He cheats for months, and then tries to punish you for leaving." "Classic David," I sighed. "He's never taken responsibility for anything." "I could testify," she offered suddenly. "About the affair, the lies he told me about your marriage. Everything." I stared at her, taken aback by the offer. "That would be complicated for you." "I don't care," she said with unexpected fierceness. "What he did to both of us was wrong, and I'm tired of men like him getting away with it." Later that day, we met with my lawyer, who listened with professional detachment as Natalie outlined her relationship with David. The dates, the promises, the lies he'd told us both. By the time we finished, my lawyer was making rapid notes, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "This changes things," she said, looking up at us. "With Ms. Bennett's testimony and the PI evidence, we have a much stronger case for an at-fault divorce based on adultery. If David wants to avoid public embarrassment, he'll be more amenable to a fair settlement. I don't want to destroy him," I clarified. "I just want what's fair." "Sometimes," my lawyer replied, closing her notebook, "the threat of consequences is more effective than the consequences themselves. Let's use what we have to negotiate from a position of strength." As we left her office, Natalie linked her arm through mine, a gesture of solidarity that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. "What happens after this?" she asked. "Once the divorce is final?" I considered the question, looking out at the city streets bustling with life. I'm not entirely sure, but for the first time in years, I'm actually excited to find out. 3 weeks after leaving my marriage, I signed a lease on a small apartment overlooking the river. It was half the size of the house David and I had shared, with none of the prestigious address or custom finishes he'd insisted upon. But it was mine, just mine, and that made it perfect. I moved in with embarrassingly few possessions. Clothes, books, my grandmother's china that had been stored in the attic because David thought it too old-fashioned for entertaining. Natalie helped me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, both of us laughing at how little I had to show for 15 years of marriage. "You really left everything," she remarked, setting down the last box of kitchen supplies. "Not everything," I corrected, unpacking a photo of Emma at her college graduation. "Just the things that don't matter anymore." The divorce proceedings had taken an unexpected turn. After my lawyer presented the evidence of David's affair, including Natalie's detailed affidavit, his aggressive posturing had deflated almost overnight. His attorney requested a private mediation, and suddenly, The man who had threatened to drag me through court for years was offering a surprisingly equitable settlement. He's worried about his reputation, my lawyer explained when I expressed disbelief, especially at the firm. They're very image-conscious, and adultery scandals don't play well with their conservative client base. I accepted the settlement with a strange sense of anticlimactic relief. No dramatic courtroom confrontations, no publicly airing our dirty laundry, just paperwork and signatures severing the legal bonds of our marriage. In the end, David's fear of exposure proved more powerful than his anger toward me. Emma came to help me settle into my new place, bringing housewarming gifts and takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. We sat on cushions on the floor, boxes still stacked around us, and ate from paper containers. "Dad says you won't talk to him," she said carefully, eyeing me over her pad thai. "I've said everything I need to say through my lawyer," I replied. "There's nothing left to discuss." She nodded, accepting this with surprising maturity. "He's different now. Subdued. I had lunch with him yesterday, and he barely talked about himself at all. Actually asked about my thesis research and listened to the answer." I smiled, spearing a piece of chicken with my plastic fork. "Divorce agrees with him then." "Mom," Emma said, setting down her food. "Can I ask you something? Something personal?" "Of course. Were you unhappy before? Before you found out about, you know?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on David's betrayal that I hadn't really examined the state of our marriage before that fateful text message. "I think I was," I admitted slowly, but I didn't let myself acknowledge it. "Your father and I had a life that looked perfect on paper. The house, the careers, the social circle. I convinced myself that was enough, that the emptiness I felt sometimes was just normal middle-aged discontent. Why didn't you leave sooner?" I looked at my daughter, this thoughtful young woman who asked such incisive questions, and felt a surge of love for her. "Partly for you," I said honestly. "I wanted to give you stability, a whole family, and partly because I was afraid. I'd been with your father since college. I didn't know who I was without him. And now," she prompted. "Now I'm finding out," I said, gesturing to the half-unpacked apartment. "It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once." Later that evening, after Emma had gone, I stood at my new bedroom window watching the river flow below, lights from the city playing on its surface. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. "How's the new place? Still need help unpacking tomorrow?" Over the past weeks, our unlikely friendship had deepened beyond our shared experience with David. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly direct, qualities I'd been missing in my social circle of carefully polished couples. "All good. Bring coffee if you come. Strong and black, like my current outlook on romance." Her response came quickly. "Deal. Also bringing paint samples. Those white walls are depressing." I smiled, tucking the phone away. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life at 43. Starting over, making new friends, learning to exist outside the confines of being someone's wife. But there was an undeniable freedom in it, a chance to rediscover parts of myself that had been dormant for years. The next day, Natalie arrived with coffee and a stack of paint chips in vibrant colors I would never have considered in my former home. "I'm thinking this deep teal for the bedroom," she said, holding up a sample against the wall. "It's bold but calming." "David would hate it," I remarked, sipping my coffee. "Excellent," she grinned. "Even more reason to use it." We spent the day painting, moving furniture, and transforming the apartment into a space that reflected the woman I was becoming, rather than the woman I had been. By evening, the main rooms were done, and we collapsed on my new second-hand sofa, exhausted, but satisfied. "I have a proposal," Natalie said suddenly, turning to face me. "My lease is up next month, and this neighborhood is closer to my office. What would you think about being roommates, just until we both get our feet under us financially?" I blinked, surprised. "You want to live with your ex-boyfriend's ex-wife? That's certainly a modern arrangement." "When you put it that way, it sounds crazy," she admitted, "but it makes sense practically. Split rent, shared utilities, and..." She hesitated. "I've enjoyed getting to know you. The real you, not the version of you David described." I looked around the apartment, at the teal accent wall, the eclectic art we'd hung, the space we'd created together. It wasn't what I'd planned, but then again, none of this was. Let's do it, I decided, surprising myself with how right it felt. But we'll need a bigger place. I know a great realtor, she said, already pulling out her phone. That night, I wrote an email to David, the first direct communication since I'd left. It was brief, practical, final. The last of my things will be out of the house by Sunday. I'm leaving the keys with Emma. I've signed the settlement papers. There's nothing left to discuss between us. I wish you well with whatever comes next. I sent it without hesitation, then closed my laptop and walked to the window. The river flowed steadily below, constant yet always changing. Like me, like life, I pressed my palm against the cool glass, feeling the boundary between my past and my future. Thin but definite, transparent but real. Tomorrow would bring more changes, more challenges, more opportunities to define myself on my own terms. For tonight, though, I was content to stand at the edge of possibility, no longer afraid of what waited on the other side.